what are the best practice available for the scheduled waste. So I'm here today basically to give an overview of the managing scheduled waste for the industries, basing on my past experience of 25 years in managing and handling scheduled waste for the various industries. Okay, so I would like to invite every one of you together with us to join our effort to protect the environment, to ensure that we are in compliance with the Environmental Quality Act and environmental regulations. Let's play our part to protect the nature, to protect our future generation, because it is all that we have and it is all fragile. So, talk about the challenges. Management of scheduled waste is most critical environmental issue in Malaysia. It's very challenging, as everyone aware. Before we ensure that we manage scheduled waste properly, we have to understand the nature of scheduled waste. What are the nature of scheduled waste? Talking about scheduled waste is toxic. Scheduled waste is hazard. So with the toxic and hazardous characteristic, obviously is dangerous. So in handling scheduled waste, managing scheduled waste is challenging because it's requires a lot of documentations, a lot of processes. Without proper monitoring, without proper tracking of the movement of scheduled waste will lead to illegal dumping, that lead to non-compliance. So compliance with generators is very important to comply to the regulations, and one of the regulations requirement is to have a competent person who handles the management for a company that generates scheduled waste. Managing scheduled waste and disposal of scheduled waste are known costly. So there's a lot of illegal dumping cases happening in Malaysia. For example, Sungai Kim Kim, that happens I think in 2019. I'm sure everyone is aware about this controversial case, where that affected more than 5,000 people. That includes children and students, So there are several waves happening around that time, which is air pollution that emit with hazardous gases, which is fluorine, xylene, that actually have an acute poisoning. So long-term effect to the human health is still not known, because the precaution, I think, is still ongoing. Normally, this kind of cases will actually last for years before it being resolved. So that's the nature of the scheduled waste. So after knowing the nature, of course, we have to know the impact if not handling the waste properly. So by mismanaging of scheduled waste can cause pollution. Pollution, we're talking about water pollution, air pollution, global warming, soil decontamination, without proper managing of scheduled waste, and that also can cause impact to human health. The waste that can transmit a lot of diseases, for example, pathogenic waste, quarantine waste, that transmit diseases, the injection tools, and those are the material that we thought is not a scheduled waste, but it is a scheduled waste, and the mishandling of scheduled waste can also impact can have a huge impact to the reputation for the company. The news spread very instantly. So social media, especially, spreading news very instantly, be it bad or good. You see that there's immediately cases published in the website, in the Facebook, and everybody get to know what's going on. There are a lot of cases actually being published, whether it's in Facebook, it's in Twitter, and then that will also impact heavy penalties and imprisonment. So then we go into the why we have to manage shared waste properly. This art shows one of the many examples of illegal cases. Waste oil being dumped in the drain, in the sea, in the river, that cause pollution to the environment, to the water. So if anyone found a similar case, a similar illegal activities, please intervene. Please be brave, because you understand why the shared waste, what is the impact of the shared waste being mishandled. So basically, if the waste is found to be leaked from a company, from your company, for example, so the owner of the company is liable to an imprisonment of not less than 5 years. Of up to 5 years, and fines of up to 500,000 ringgit. So let's refresh ourselves about the objectives of the environmental quality regulations. It is also important for the waste generator to understand the regulation, why the regulations are established and enforced. One of the objectives is proper management of shared waste. Waste generators must ensure the management of shared waste being implemented and also carried out. Basically, it's a step-by-step SOPs. That's very important. Waste generator must have that. So because the shared waste is continuing generated, as simple as in the office, we are using ink, we are using fluorescent lamp. Those are contain shared waste. So what would be the steps if we were to dispose the shared waste from the office? We drive a car, we change the engine oil every now and then. Waste oil is generated from the lab. You operating a lab, you offset chemical, unused chemicals, and used bottles, for example, used containers. That's all considered shared waste. Okay, so that would be the what happened? I am myself. Sorry, I did this. Okay, I'm so sorry again, the technical issues. All right, so the next one would be to prevent the environmental and ecosystem, the environment and ecosystem being polluted. So managing shared waste at source is very important in preventing illegal activities. So release of hazardous gases and hazardous waste that impacting the environment is very, very critical. So, and the next objective would be the monitor movement and handling of shared waste. So monitoring and tracking of shared waste is important. notification are transmitted, and proper management of tracking risk tracking element is important to avoid illegal activities or illegal dumping. So those are the three. What happened? Okay, those are the three objectives in compliance with the environmental regulations. So basic information of scheduled waste. Basically, we have already known. So what is scheduled waste? Why is scheduled waste? Why is scheduled waste called? Why is waste called scheduled waste? You know. The scheduled waste characteristic is toxic. One of the characteristics of scheduled waste when they have characteristic of toxic and hazardous, it's all considered scheduled waste. So the waste must be labeled as per the pictogram skull and bone. So for example, hazardous and toxic waste like mercury, cadmium, and that contain heavy metals. Yeah. So one other elements why scheduled waste, the waste are called scheduled waste, because it is ignitable, ignite to the can easily ignite. Basically, can easily catch fire, auto-ignitable with the low flash point, and can easily combustible. That is one of the criteria of the scheduled waste. And corrosive, yeah. Any waste that has the elements of corrosive, for example, acids and alkaline, that is waste. If it's reactive, when it's exposed to the air and exposed to the water, it can be react and emit hazardous fume, hazardous gases, or can explode. That is scheduled waste. And lastly, when the waste has infectious and pathogenic characteristic, for example, the clinical waste, yeah, that is also classified as scheduled waste. So these are five main characteristics for scheduled waste. Any of these elements exist in your waste, yeah, it will be considered as scheduled waste. So all hazardous waste are scheduled waste, but not all scheduled waste are hazardous and toxic. So I will go through later why I said that. So we have a kind of example after this. So basically, right, let's move on. In the first schedule of the environmental quality regulations, there are 77 scheduled waste codes listed in the EQR. They consist of five groups of scheduled waste, which is scheduled waste group 1, that is meant for metal and metal bearing waste. What's metal bearing waste? It's like slag, dross that contain mercury, arsenic, mercury containing cadmium, that falls under scheduled waste group 1. Scheduled waste group 2 is basically for organic materials that probably contain metals, you know, for example, waste catalyst, acid, spent acid, that is falls under group 2. Whereas group 3 is inorganic material. Yeah, inorganic materials like spent acid, spent oil, sludge, and waste oil, that is falls under SW3, and SW4 for either organic and inorganic. For example, a mixture of scheduled waste and non-scheduled waste, that is considered organic and organic. Residues from incineration activity, is also considered scheduled waste group 4. And lastly, scheduled waste group 5, which is other waste, and waste that is or residue generated from the treatment facility or recovery facility. So those are the 5 groups of scheduled waste. I'm very sure how many of our participants today, 178. From the 178 participants, I'm very sure you are aware about any of the type of scheduled waste generated, whether you are working for a company or you ever found a scheduled waste under certain waste codes. So there are 77 altogether. All right. So basically, let's move on to the roles and responsibilities of waste generator. Who will be the ultimate accountable accountable for scheduled waste generated? Of course, that I'm sure everyone know about it. The owner of the company or the CEO of the company that has been entrusted by the owner to run the business. So that's very clear. At the end of the day, who will be accountable? Any illegal, any scheduled waste found down the road, not at the prescribed premise, or it's handled illegally. So at the end of the day, the ultimate accountable is the owner of the company. So bear in mind. Yeah. What are the roles? Yeah, the roles are. The very first thing when the new scheduled waste is generated, notification to the waste is generated, what quantity is generated, what kind of process has gone through, from which company, the names of the owners. That is very important in this scheduled waste form. Scheduled waste second schedule form that can be downloaded from the DOE website. So those information has to be submitted to DOE within 30 days from the waste has been generated. Same goes for if let's say you have any new scheduled waste generated, that actually you will have to do the same thing. Whether the submission has to be done twice or more than that, that can be done. Okay. Then next would be the identify and classify the scheduled waste. Once you notify, you already know what kind of waste you generated. Then you will have to identify under what codes are they, under what kind of hazards that waste carries. What kind of label that need to be fixed. That is the second responsibility of the waste generator. All right. After you classify and identify them, that comes to segregation. The segregation must be done according to the incompatibility chart, according to hazards, according to the scheduled waste codes. And once this has been segregated, when the incompatibility chart has been done, so storage will have to be done according to what has been set. Okay, in the storage, you have to ensure that the scheduled waste must be packed correctly, the label must be fixed, and the the scheduled waste shouldn't be stored more than 20 metric ton or not more than 180 days, whichever comes first. It is advisable for the waste generator to dispose their waste as soon as it is generated, because we don't know about the hazard or the impact to the environment, to the surrounding, to the people handling the scheduled waste. So for example, a company that produces only 1 ton of scheduled waste within a year, when it would be the best time to dispose? The best is, of course, immediately after it has been generated, but you have an ultimate. The ultimate time would be 180 days from the first generation. Okay, So that is very important. So fail to comply will lead to penalty. All right. So if the schedule waste is not labeled correctly, if it's not stored within the limit, that will be lead to penalty. All right. So once you have the material, you have the inventory. If let's say we have enough inventory for disposal within 180 days, or approximately, or it can be more than 20 tons. If you can get more than 20 tons, you have to immediately dispose it. So method of disposal must be identified. So there are several methods of disposal, which I will brief in our later slides. So once you decide of where to send the material to, it is a responsibility of the waste generator to transport the schedule waste using DOE licensed transporter. The documentations are intact, like schedule waste, the consignment notes and waste card. Yeah. So those are the things that has to be attached together with the consignment, or to be passed to the driver, to the transporter. And emergency response plan, emergency response procedures must be implemented for handling of schedule waste, for storage, and even for transportation. Okay, and it's also spelled in the regulations that people handling the schedule waste or managing the schedule waste must be a competent person. So any company, be it SMEs, be it multinational companies, the handling of schedule waste must be by a competent person. Yeah, now we call it step 1. And finally, all employees, people handling the schedule waste must be trained. All employees and people handling schedule waste must comprehend the nature and the properties of the schedule waste, so that extra precautionary actions can be taken to eliminate any safety issues, to eliminate any environmental issues. So these are the responsibilities as waste generator. Please ensure that all waste generators comply with all these requirements. And it comes next to the identification and classification process. How do we identify the scheduled waste? How do we know the waste is identified as scheduled waste? The process, there are a few steps of processes how to identify. Basically, the very first step is to know the source. Like I mentioned from the earlier slides just now, management of scheduled waste must be handled from the source. So what is source? What do you mean by source? What do we mean by source here? The source basically the raw material used. For example, in industry like a printing company, what are the source here? Talking about ink, we're talking about papers, we're talking about we're talking about thinner, and gloves. So those are the source of the raw material and equipment, or equipment used. And next, what would be the criteria in identifying and classifying the scheduled waste is type of process. We're talking about just now, if in the printing industry, the process is printing, gravure process, cutting process. Those are the processes. So every process we have to understand what are the discharge from every process. Yeah. In the printing process or printing machine, there will be ink waste. Yeah. Some people will use thinner to clean their hands. That consider waste. And of course, when the people are using gloves, use gloves that contaminated with waste, contaminated with ink, for example, in this printing company, it will be considered as waste. So next would be application. What kind of application of the waste used? In printing company just now, what is the application? The ink is used for printing, that's for sure. And thinner is used for cleaning, for washing. Glove is used for cleaning. So those are the application. And next would be the properties. Understand the properties from whether or not physical properties, let's say, of course, whether it's liquid or solid form, and also the hazards that leads from the process. From the raw material itself, normally you will spell all the hazards, so we have to review from the SDS itself in a combination. Okay, so next will be the mass balance. What is in and what is out? How much is in and how much is out? That is another way of identifying the waste. Okay, and lastly, in order to identify the scheduled waste, labs must be conducted. There are several types of labs tests, which is scheduled waste characteristic is one of the compulsory tests that has been enforced by Department of Environment. Yeah. For example, TCLP test, TTLC test. Those are the tests to identify hazard elements in the waste. And lastly, the compositional test, full compositional test, which is like parameter test for different kinds of metals content in the scheduled waste. So with this process, you can easily identify what type of scheduled waste it falls, what code scheduled waste code number will can be identified. Okay, I hope this process is clear. Otherwise, we can review a little bit further after we finish off this session. Okay, so that comes to understanding the DOE license. All right, DOE has issued 760 licenses for the prescribed premises for the transporters. So out of the 760, 413 are licensed for prescribed premise. The prescribed premise here basically a treatment facility, a recovery facility, incineration, landfill, land farming. Those are under that license. So we will go through this a little bit later. Yeah, and last, which is the transporter. 347 license has been issued to the transporter. There are several types of transporters here. There are tankers, yeah, to carry waste oil, chemicals. There are haulier that carries scheduled waste in containers. There are normal trucks, lorries available. So there are many licensed companies that can handle scheduled waste and to transport the scheduled waste around Malaysia. So let's move to the method of handling scheduled waste, a method of disposal of scheduled waste. Historically, Malaysia has adopted cradle to grave concept, where this is promoting or prioritizing landfill and incineration. So basically this hierarchy of disposal has been used in the past. Of course, when we talk about disposal to by incineration on landfill, that basically can cause long-term impact to the environment, where there's a lot of new secured landfill has been developed, you know, that will cause leachate problem, will cause illegal dumping, potentially water and oil pollution. So there is a paradigm change from the cradle to grave to cradle to cradle. This cradle to cradle basically promoting resource recovery. So basically, the waste, we are targeting for zero waste. They are in promoting what you call the engineering, zero engineering concept, where helps the products can be targeting zero discharge waste, and reduce the quantity of waste, and they are also promoting reuse of the product, and and also regeneration. Some of the known technology in the industries, they have like treatment, in situ treatment facility, where the waste is keep on generating, and the waste can be reused, the products can be reused for as good as new. Yeah. Of course, when it comes to regeneration, that will reduce in terms of cost for disposal, and cost of buying a new raw material, and of course the prolong the discharge of the waste. Yeah. So of course, recovery for metal recovery, for example, and oil recovery. That is another method that is being promoted for this cradle to cradle concept. And lastly, co-processing. Co-processing is the one of the best practice for certain waste that can be reused as alternative raw material or alternative fuel. So those are the change, yeah, from how this cradle to grave concept changed to cradle to cradle, where the government is promoting zero discharge. Okay, then let's go through the method of disposal for scheduled waste. So as everyone know, the scheduled waste, we have to go back to basic here. Once we decide what kind of, you have the scheduled waste, you have done the analysis, you have actually identified them, and you have selected, so-called selected the waste disposal companies to handle it, whether or not for disposal or for treatment. So here, basically, to show that several methods of disposal is being practiced, and sending to prescribed premise is straightforward, where it's readily available in Malaysia. Whether you want to send it for treatment and recovery. Yeah. For treatment and recovery, when you send to them, the scheduled waste becomes non-scheduled waste, because it converted into a different goods totally. And for incineration, basically, you will still have the scheduled waste at the end of the process, because incineration will generate residues. Same goes to landfill. Landfill is an option, is the least option for scheduled waste, basically the last resort, where you do not have any other option for any other better option for disposal. So because these two, incineration and landfill, still have the name of scheduled waste, so the liability will still remain with the waste generator, even though it has been passed to a third company, a prescribed premise itself. Okay, and as I mentioned, co-processing is one of the best practice, where the material can be sent for, can be used as alternative raw material and alternative fuel. So this process is quite lengthy process, yeah, because analysis takes some time, trial burn will also take some time. We will go into details slightly later. And what other options do you have for managing your scheduled waste, which is special management? This special management is basically used for what you call a non-hazardous material. If you confirm, once you run the test, you have done the TCLT test, you have done the TPLC test, and it's confirmed that there is no elements of hazardous in it, so you can apply a special management program. Yeah, So that will basically to reclassify the scheduled waste to non-scheduled waste. All right, and the last option, basically for scheduled waste that contain precious metal, let's say. This is normally the case, yeah. When BASEL option is to actually sending the waste abroad to overseas, to the OECD country for reclamation of precious metal, let's say, yeah. Or e-waste sent to export for reclamation for refining. Application to DOE must be obtained. So these are the three main options or methodologies for disposing your scheduled waste. Okay, let's go through the process. Yeah, this is the flow for disposal of scheduled waste to prescribed premise. As usual, as mentioned earlier, why we have these two scheduled waste tests. Yeah? One is the scheduled waste characteristic test. This is basically to define the waste acceptance criteria, and similarly for full composition test. Normally, if you send for landfill, for incineration, scheduled waste characteristic test is enough. Whereas if you tend to send for recovery, if you know the scheduled waste contain metals, or let's say, nickel, copper, you will have to test the waste for full compositional test. That will tell how much metal content in there, how much nickel, how much in terms of percentage. So when you basically choose the method of disposal, these are the criteria that is needed. So basically that will tell you, that will define waste acceptance criteria that accepted by the prescribed premise. Okay, for the different process, for the different methodology. Okay, of course, as the very first stage, what you have to do is to get the TWD form approved by DOE when you have decided of where to send to a particular company. Once the TWD has been approved, then the mobilization of the scheduled waste can be commenced. So ensure during the transportation what you have to provide to the transporter, which is consignment notes, waste card, ERP. Those are important for the transporter to carry, so that they know where the material to be sent to, what kind of material that they carry, in case of emergency during the journey, what can be done to prevent the pollution. And lastly, the transporter will bring to the selected prescribed premise, whether you send it for treatment or recycling or incineration and also landfill. So when you send the material to treatment company, recovery and incineration, normally they will the waste the prescribed premise will normally issue certificate of liability annulment. So this basically is equivalent to that certificate. So this you have to obtain this so that you know when you send the material to a company for processing, you know that the material has been processed, and you can live you can have peace of mind when you have that certificate with you. So that's actually complete the cycle when you send the material to prescribed premise. Okay, let's go on to co-processing. This flow is quite a tedious and lengthy process where same kind of test is to be conducted, where you have to confirm the materials as the characteristic of the material, yeah, to define the waste acceptance criteria. Same goes for the full compositional test, Some of the parameters in the waste sometimes is not acceptable by the co-processing companies. Yeah, co-processing companies is normally licensed by DOE, so they are also called prescribed premise. Waste acceptance criteria is defined and accepted by the prescribed premise. So DOE submission must be done. Basically, a lot of documentation has to be compiled during this time. You have to have like a PNID, you know, of the process. You have to have complete documentation like SDS, waste card, of course, the full compositional test. Once that is submitted to DOE, DOE will review, and of course, if it's everything in order, DOE will then instruct the co-processing company to run a trial burn. This trial burn is basically to prove that scheduled waste that you sent to this particular prescribed premise will not emit any hazardous gases, will meet the emission standards, will meet the water discharge. And once that is done, trial burn normally required to be done by within 6 months. Yeah, that will prove the it's constant results basically. So once that completed, the trial burn report will be submitted to DOE for further approval. So once it's approved, then the material is safe to be sent for co-processing as a raw material, alternative raw material, or alternative fuel. This is normally sent to the cement companies. Yeah, normally used as to substitute shale, for example, substitute waste oil, substitute fuel, diesel, as alternative to fuel. Okay, so that is the complete process. It's not simple, but the process is a lengthy process. The trial and the test, the full compositional test is also a lengthy process. So, but once this is done, once the DOE has issued an approval, it will be much easier. It's worth the effort, and of course, it will save you a lot of money for the disposal. And if it's no, of course, we will have to go back to scheduled waste and look into the other options for disposal. And next would be the process for special management of scheduled waste. So basically, for special management, there are a lot more tests to be conducted. Just scheduled waste characteristic tests. The waste generator must also conduct TCLP, TCLC, and Appendix 2 as per the scheduled management procedures. This is basically used for non-hazardous waste and non-toxic waste, where you want to classify the material, the scheduled waste, as non-scheduled waste. Only for waste that generated in volume, in high volume, and it's also frequently generated. So that is the test has to be done. So once the result shows there is no elements of non-hazardous waste, that can be applied for special management. This is a process, also a tedious process in getting the special management approval. But in this special management, the same documentation has to be provided. That includes PNID, the flow diagram, flow description, the mass balance, and the what you call the ERP, and all the mitigation, risk mitigation documents has also to be submitted. And once this is submitted, DOE will normally visit the plant to confirm that is the process. To confirm the process as what has been declared according to the PNID, the flow diagram, the volume that has been discharged, and basically to ensure conformity is what we have declared in the submission. So finally, DOE will then issue approval. If it's yes, of course, it will be considered as non-scheduled waste. Then the waste can be disposed of as a domestic waste. Yeah, normally DOE will issue a letter confirming the same. And if it's not, we will go back to the normal procedure of enhancing scheduled waste to prescribed premise. So this is also a lengthy process. There are cases that, based on my past experience, this special management program can take about more than a year, yeah, to get it approved. But it's worth the effort, because the moment scheduled waste is declared as non-scheduled waste, you save a lot of money. All right. So. All right, then the other option we are talking about flow for BASEL transboundary movement. So this is also, as mentioned earlier, this is meant for waste that is to be sent for reclamation or refining to extract the metals. Normally, DOE will allow this application when there is no local prescribed premise that can treat or they can extract the precious metal to specifications that needed. Yeah. So what are the process? The waste generator will first compile all the documentations required from several parties, whoever that involved in this BASEL protocol. Yeah. From the waste generator, from the waste importer, from transportation companies, from the vessel companies, must provide insurance and bank guarantees. Those are the documents that need to be prepared to be submitted to DOE. So once the documents submitted, DOE will review. Yeah, DOE's review period normally within 1 month, which is 21 working days. So DOE will then, within that 21 working days, DOE will then notify transit and import countries. If they found the documentations are intact or the declarations are in satisfaction. So when DOE is sent to notify transit and import countries, they will do the same thing. They will review the documentations. If it's everything in order, otherwise, it has to go back to DOE and for the waste generator to update and resend back to them for further review. Once everything is in order, they will then send the willingness to accept, or they call it consent, to Malaysian DOE. Yeah, confirming that the waste can be imported to their country, or the waste can be transit or transshipped within their country, within their port, if they say, in this case will be a ship. Yeah. So once DOE receive this confirmation from the consent from the transit and import countries, DOE will then issue the approval to the waste generator. So bear in mind as well, yeah, in the transit and import country may impose additional requirements like fees to be paid, levy to be paid, or bank guarantee to be issued. That is normally the case, yeah. And okay, go back to the approval. DOE issued approval to waste generator. With that, only the waste generator can export the waste. Yeah. So this is one part of the BASEL transboundary movement, and the challenging part is to export them. You know, because the application is based on what my past experience. Yeah, the application approval will be obtained within within 4 to 6 months. So when we submit, we have to submit the shipping schedule which is mentioning the port of transit, port of import. But when we want to ship the material, meaning to say 6 months after the submission, the vessel might change, the transit port might change. So there's a lot of back and forth if there is change in routing. So that's also a challenging part when we handle BASEL transboundary movement. So with this, basically the waste can be exported freely according to the conditions set by DOE. They normally want the waste generator to report 7 days before departure of waste to or waste to be imported, to be exported. So those are the requirements, important requirements by DOE. Description must be tally with what has been submitted. The quantity must not exceed the declared quantity during application. So those are the challenges. From the past 25 years, I've managed from BASEL transboundary movement for various companies, and so far it's a success. There is no fail so far. I hope we are still handling a few more applications currently. So the challenging now is also the challenging time where during COVID-19 pandemic, shipment we have limited shipment because of a lot of containers from Asia exported to overseas did not come back. So there is less containers coming from Asia to overseas. So there's a lot of ports of transit in the end of the day. Then we have to get approval for every port of transit. Okay, so these are all, we're talking about the co-processing, special management, and BASEL application. These are all the best practice, and it's proven success and accepted by the various industries. And yeah, so something that you have to think of about your scheduled waste. So with that, I think I have done my, I've completed my session. So I hope this session is useful. If you have any question, anything that you want to ask about managing scheduled waste, please feel free to contact us. We will be more than happy to assist. So with that, thank you very much for attending this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention. Any question, I pass this back to Shafiqah to take the deck.
Okay, thank you, Paras. So Paras, we have a lot of questions from participants. So okay, let me just read the questions. Okay, so there are participants who are interested in our schedule waste management. So like Mr. Muhammad Ilman, they ask us what type of schedule waste code that intensive energy collect and treat.
Okay,
Yeah.
good question. All right, being a consultant company, we handle all kinds of schedule waste codes. Yeah. From group 1 to group 5, we have what you call partners in managing partners, prescribed premise partners. Yeah, within Malaysia, we do have from overseas as well. So yeah, we handle everything.
Okay, so next question is from Mr. Edwin. He asked, does your company help on identify the disposal or recycling method for scheduled waste? And the other question he asked, does your company conduct the application for special management for other company?
Yes, both questions, the answer is yes. We can help you to dispose in a proper manner. The best options, actually, we will analyze what we will do. Yeah, we will analyze your scheduled waste, and we will determine we will do the economics, with economic of scale for a different type of scheduled waste, and we will propose of which option to go about. And for the special management, yes, we do that. Please provide us the information, like we need a sample for testing, definitely. Unless you have already done the testing, like TCLP, TPLC, or scheduled waste characteristic. Please forward it to us. Let us have a look at it, and we will propose you the best solution for special management.
Okay, next question is from Mr. Edwin as well.
Hi,
Any recommendation on the recycling activity for SW204? And the other question is the landfill for scheduled waste SW204 still available currently?
Okay, 204 is method of hazard site, I think. Yeah. So if the scheduled waste contain metal, right? What we normally do, we will analyze, we will identify whether or not there is value contained in the waste that we can recover. Then we have an option for whether or not to be disposed or to be landfill. Landfill is still available. I can tell you landfill is still available, but we try to minimize landfill. As I mentioned, landfill can lead to long-term liability to the waste generator because of leachate problem. Yeah. Try to avoid landfill, but if you have no choice, let's look at the overall concept of treatment, also disposal of scheduled waste.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Remy. He asked how to do the scheduled waste labeling, like the detail of the label, type and amount. But I think this one will be covered in our online training, right?
Yes.
On 30 and 31st March.
Yeah. Basically, how to do proper labeling. These are all related to the tests that you conducted earlier. Yeah. Scheduled waste tests that will determine the hazardous nature of the waste, and you will have to know where is the source. The very first thing you have to know, where is the waste coming from? Yeah, from which process, what application? Then you will know whether under which category they are false and what code, what scheduled waste code, and so on. And it all refers in the AQA. There are information available there. Alright.
Okay. So the next question, does sanitizer, which is isopropyl alcohol, considered as scheduled waste?
Oh, I guess that's not. Otherwise, we are, everybody carrying scheduled waste everywhere. So I don't think that is scheduled waste. But unless the volume is big, not to be applied to, or it has already been expired, that will be considered as scheduled waste.
Okay. And the next question is from two different questions, but since they are related, so I just combine into one question. Okay. Is SDS needed for scheduled waste, and why do we need SDS for each scheduled waste?
Okay. SDS is equivalent to waste card. Okay. So basically, SDS will have 14 elements. That is mainly for when you want to send for, if let's say you want to reuse that as into different kind of usage, you have to have SDS for people to understand how to manage and handle them. If you want to export, that is a requirement by the Interpol or in the what's called international or even customs. They usually need SDS. But for local disposal, waste card will be good enough.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Hafiz. What is the best practice arrangement segregation for chemical storage of scheduled waste?
That is based on the incompatibility chart. Once you have done the analysis and used compatibility chart to what kind of waste can be stored together. That's how you want to segregate the scheduled waste.
Thank you, Pan. So, okay, so here there's a lot more question from our client. Okay, does your company do consultancy for co-processing for scheduled waste? Is that for application to DOE? Does your company help the application process?
Yeah, I think I've answered this question from Edwin, right? Yeah, both answers is yes. Okay.
Okay, so the next question is damaged solar panel is scheduled waste because DOE is not providing any proper details.
Well, if the solar panel contain any electronics elements, that consider e-waste.
Okay, so the next question is from Suchini. Is there any other disposal method for pesticide?
Pesticides. How to implement disposal method
Disposal
for
method
pesticides?
for pesticide.
Yeah, pesticide is the most dangerous. Has got a very high hazards content of waste. So far the incineration is still the best, but if you can run the full test to understand the waste fully, then we can choose, we can have an options. We have to look at options of the disposal methodology. Yeah.
Okay, for the next question is from Siti Saliza. What is the ARM
Okay.
stand for?
Alternative raw material or alternative fuel. This is basically used, this term is used for co-processing. When a company produce, for example, produce a huge volume of waste oil, let's say, yeah. So that can be sent for alternative fuel to cement industry for them to use in their burner instead of send them for disposal. And same goes for alternative raw material. For example, catalyst that contains alumina, silica, that also can be sent to cement plant under co-processing as for them to use as an alternative raw material to substitute shale, for example. Yes?
Okay, so next question is from Mr. Lukmatul Hakim. For fluorescent tube, we categorize as SW109. How about LED light bulbs? Is it considered as SW110?
Like I mentioned earlier, if any equipment of any waste that has elements of electronics, that will be considered as electronic e-waste, electronic waste. Okay.
Okay, so the next question is from Ms. Sheila. Chemical used for water treatment plant considered as scheduled waste?
Chemical use for treatment plant is not considered scheduled waste as long as they are still in use. But once it's no longer in use, for example, unused, for example, or expired, that is considered scheduled waste. But as long as it's still in use in the process, that is not considered scheduled waste. But remember, scheduled waste is not a chemical, yeah? It's not like, you know, if the chemical is classified as dangerous, that is not scheduled waste because it is chemical products. The moment it became waste, that is classified scheduled waste.
Okay, so next question is from Mr. Hafiz. How to handle mix of waste?
Mix of waste, that is under group 4. Normally, you will have to identify which are the main elements or main property. If non-scheduled waste is more than scheduled waste, as long as the waste is intact or in touch with scheduled waste, that is become scheduled waste. Just a classification from you know, inorganic, a mixture of organic and inorganic, or mixture of scheduled waste.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Edwin again. For special management of schedule waste, does it currently has a limited period for the license?
There are cases, yeah, for a limited, there are cases for a limited period because if let's say the waste is generated like once off or every 2 years, once every 2 years or once every 3 years, that will be basically they have a period, they have a limitation, meaning to say is the application must be done case by case basis. Whereas for the waste that will be continuously generating, if for example a wash, yeah, with a consistent parameters or consistent what you call content, yeah, that can have it's like a blanket approval, but normally DOE will give a certain period for a renewal or for resubmission.
So the next question is from Ms. Adila. For waste oil, if for example the oil is mix of oils but primarily SW306, do we have to categorize it as SW306 or 311 waste of oil?
It's basically the main component. Yeah, if the main component is 306, then that has to be considered as 306.
Okay, for the next question is from Mr. Ilman. How about the alternative for disposal of chemical soot? Is it compulsory to dispose chemical soot in HDPE drum? Or need to verify the activity of chemical soot if it is contaminated or as? Otherwise, just dispose it in metal drum.
Okay, the contaminated contaminated soot, contaminated with what kind of chemical? If it's corrosive, then HDPE drum will be suitable. If it's if it's not corrosive, steel drum can be used.
Okay, so next question is from Ms. Erica. Can the company collect the expired stock from our customer and dispose on behalf?
Can the company collect the expired stock from our customer and dispose on our behalf? Well, in principle, yes and no. It depends on the who generates the waste. If your customer generate the waste, the declaration must be done by the waste generator. But you can arrange the collection on their behalf. That's not a problem. As long as the company that you want to send to is DOE prescribed premise and also using DOE licensed transporter.
Next question is from Ms. Dewi. How you want to differentiate SW 421 and 422?
How to differentiate 421 and 422? What code is this? Let me see. A mixture of schedule waste, a mixture of schedule waste, and non-schedule waste. Look at the main component. Yeah, the main component will be the classification to use for selection of schedule waste code. Yeah.
Okay, so next question is from Mr. Zulfadli. If hydraulic and engine oil already mixed together in the same container, how to clarify?
Again, it's about the majority of the waste. If what is the question again?
Hydraulic and engine
hydraulic
oil.
and engine oil, yeah. If the component of engine oil more than hydraulic oil, then your classification is hydraulic oil. So the main component would be the classification.
Okay, so next is question from Mr. Akmal. If their site has conduct TCLP and TTAC test? Is this test can be identified which waste code did they categorize for into? If yes, how to determine by using those results?
Okay, TCLP and TTLC is basically it's not a way of TCLP and TCLT is one of the tests or two of the tests that has to be conducted for shadow waste that can also be identified, but the main component of the how to decide whether or not the shadow waste falls under a specific codes that's always have to run a compositional test.
So we have few questions left. How about used battery? Currently, quite hard to get licensed company to dispose this item. For Mr. Azhar.
Used battery, there are several types of battery, whether it's handphone battery or it's lead acid battery. Those are available companies. If you're talking about the dry batteries, right now there is an initiative where the batteries can be set for. It's done by the local authority company. Yeah, it's like a. It's the local authority that has that initiative for collection of dry batteries.
Okay, so the next question is from Mr. Abdul Rahman. For SW 2004 at our factory, analyzed by SIRIM, are way below hazardous characteristic. But why is it still under schedule A's?
Okay, so that's where you have to apply special management. That will determine whether or not DOE will accept whether the shadow waste, the sludge classified as shadow waste. Special management is the option.
Okay. So next question from Mr. Akmal. How about chemical waste? Did this type of waste need to be tested before sent to the waste collector?
Yes, it has to be tested. One of the compulsory tests is shadow waste characteristic test. Yeah, that will determine what kind of hazards belongs to this chemical. If it's meant for, if you do not want to see any value out of it. If you think that you want to recover some value, other tests will have to be conducted.
Oh, Mr. Abdurrahman said it's applied and expired but cannot continue.
What is that?
The question earlier. This one. They said they already applied for
special management, then?
Already expired.
Or already expired but cannot continue. Why can't continue? What is the reason that DOE has imposed? Something that we can discuss, out of this session.
Try from identity. Okay. So maybe later we can discuss personally with Mr. Abdurrahman. You can drop us your email. Okay, so the next question is from Mr. Chu earlier regarding the hand sanitizer. It is not schedule A, but what is it is expired hand sanitizer?
Yeah, basically once you when you use it, it's okay. As long as the material is still in use, you are using it, it's still good, it's still within the expiry date, so it's not considered shadow waste. But if it's expired, with if let's say talking about, once it's expired, it's considered it has impact to the human health. If you use it, you can have impact to your skin. That because of that, the material, the sanitizer classified as shadow waste.
Okay, so the next question, can you comment on the segregation of duty for computer person and owner of the top management when there is some agreement raised by authority?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, the ultimate accountability is still the top management, is still the owner of the company. But if you assign, yeah, there is what you call the assign of responsibility assigned to the competent person. That competent person is liable. You can use that contract, so-called contract, yeah, the assignment, official assignment, not by way of mouth, official consignment assignments. Then that can be used as your legal documents. So basically, your first layer of the first layer will be the competent person, but the ultimate accountability is still the owner of the company.
Okay, so next question is from Ms. Sheila. If chemical considered as hazardous waste, how about WWTP mixed together with sludge considered as scheduled waste? If company end of project need to dispose as scheduled waste? If yes, what class code category?
All right. First, look at the composition again. Yeah, what is the majority of the material? If the majority of the material is more hazards than the earlier, the smaller quantity, then the classification is to be classified as the most what you call hazards to waste code.
So the next question is from Ms. Azlin. In every company, how many times can be allowed to execute of scheduled waste out from the premise right to the waste management company per year?
There is no limitation. As long as you generate, you can actually deliver or move your scheduled waste out of your facility anytime, any day. So there is no limitation of number of days to be delivered, but it's just the arrangement between you and the prescribed premise.
Okay, so we have 5 more questions left. So Mr. On asked us, recently there is a spike in scheduled waste landfill cost. Do you have any idea about the reason?
Yeah, one of it is because of the secure landfill site is getting smaller. You know, they will have to construct new landfill sites. So that is the main reason. Apart from that, the secure landfill will have to be maintained to avoid leachate problem.
Okay, before that, we will take our last question from Mr. Jaya. After that, if you have any more questions, you can email to us at admin@isb.my.
Yes.
Okay, so next question is from Mr. Hilmi. Is grease trap waste from office building, which is pantry, comprised of 10 level, should be considered as solid waste or scheduled waste in SW 312?
From the grease from a food base, right? That is normally falls under the it's handled by the domestic authority.
Okay, so next question is from Ms. Azlin. May I know that from waste out from whole in industry sector can be easier mixed with COVID-19 germ spread in air?
I know that
Any scientific research can support?
I know that from waste out from whole in industries sectors can be easily mixed with COVID-19 germ spread in the air. Any specific research can? That's a good question. Okay, if you're talking about the pathogenic waste or even infection waste, that can, once it's mixed together, it's considered scheduled waste. In terms of the, you know, from various industries, it can be mixed because of it, you know, as long as it's considered as infectious or pathogenic waste. COVID-19 germs spreader is also considered as infectious scheduled waste.
Okay, so next question is from Ms. Agnes. Can we trade in used battery instead of dispose as scheduled waste?
Well, this is again about what kind of batteries, you know. If it's phone, you have to deal, definitely you have to deal with the company that is selling phones, or acid-led batteries. There is a company to do recycling, they don't normally do trade-in, but they do purchase sometime if the metal contents in the acid that can be recovered.
Okay, so we have last two questions. Then second last question is from Ms. Azlin. If you want to generate back the waste item for improvement, how to do the process?
I don't quite understand the question. If we want to generate back the waste
for improvement.
If you want to reuse, I'm not clear about the question. I think can resend your question back to us in email. Probably we can have more understanding about this question.
Okay. Last question is from Mr. Jaya. Can jumbo bag used as disposal of paint container?
All right. As long as the paint containers do not corrode, do not leak, jumbo bag can be used. Otherwise, more proper packaging like would be better to avoid any leaking or of paint.
Okay, so I think that's all our question for today. If you have any more question, you can send your question to admin@isb.my. So thank you so much, Puan Rose, for your insightful sharing. I'm sure all of us has learned a lot about schedule waste management today. Okay, so
thank you everyone. Stay safe. And Assalamualaikum.
Okay, I will share our upcoming training schedule. Please wait a little bit. Okay, so here is our upcoming training schedule until May 2021. So at the end of March, on 30 and 31st March, we have detailed online paid training on effective schedule waste management. Here you can learn more detail about our schedule waste management. We have applied 5 CEP points for this training, and we also have HRDF claimable. And then we have control of hazardous energy, lockout or takeout, LOTO, free webinar on 6 April 2021. Then we will have effective workplace safety committee, free webinar on 20th April 2021. After that, we will have energy isolation and lockout takeout, LOTO implementation, online training. This one is paid training as well on 28 April. And lastly, we will have effective HSC committee online training on 24 and 25th May 2021. So this schedule is up until May only. After that, we will continue sending to you our upcoming training schedule. Okay, so I would like to thank you all of you for your time today. If you have any more question, you can send your inquiry to admin@isb.my. Or if you have question regarding our training, if you want in-house training, you can email to trainingforyou@isb.my. Okay, thank you everyone and have a nice day.
Tahu?